Okay, welcome to this live sculpting session. In this one, I'm going to be taking a single photo reference. In this case, it's bodybuilder pose, Bob. Is it Cicerillo? In Spanish, it would be Bob Cicerillo. And just an interesting pose. I try to save these poses that I think would make good studies on my Instagram page, and so that's just where I've saved that. If you're interested in following me on Instagram, you can find me at Andrew Joseph Keith 15 on Instagram. And so to do this, I just have a simple wire armature, aluminum wire armature. I think this is 18 gauge aluminum wire. There's several methods of how to build this. This method you can find on the Proco 3D YouTube channel. If you just search wire armature Proco 3D, it'll come up the specific method that I used to build this one. And again, it's about 18 gauge, pretty thin aluminum wire. And I do have some Chavant NSP clay that I've warmed up, so it's nice and soft right now. And this is the medium clay mixed with just a little bit of hard. And I like to mix in just a little bit of hard because I prefer a little bit firmer of a clay, but it makes it difficult at the beginning stages. So I start off with it warmed up. I just warmed it up on the lowest setting that I could put in the oven, and now I have some nice warm, soft, malleable clay that I can work with. If you're interested in sculpting, then definitely check out my sculpting courses. There's also some free PDFs on the figure sculpting course and the portrait sculpting course that will get you started. It has all of the free assignments as well as the premium assignments, but you can start off with just the free stuff if you haven't yet invested in the premium, and that'll allow you to get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is try to capture the pose. Let's actually zoom in just a little bit more. And I'm trying a new background. I'm trying a white background, so let me know if you guys prefer the white or the black background. I've heard that that lighter colored videos do better than dark videos, and almost all my videos are in black background. So for all I know, that's why my YouTube channel doesn't have, a million followers. It's just because of black background. But let's see, so we're just going to start off by capturing the pose. So his shoulders are turning this way, this arm's coming up and a little bit out, kind of twisting in. And this arm is back behind the head. Let's see, back here, coming very much forward and behind the head. Head's tilting a little bit this way, and let's see, the shoulders are nice and broad, so I'm gonna make sure I give room for that. And there we have, I think, what is basically the pose. Let's see. So the hips I think are more turned one way and the shoulders the other way. So I'm going to make sure I get that twist in, because that's something that makes this pose interesting. Okay. And I'm also going to kind of change the, I only have one image, only one reference image, so I have to make the best guess that I can and try to get it to balance. So I just want to get a good feel for the structure, the skeleton or armature, before I start adding clay. And so I think this feels pretty good. And with this, because it's a bodybuilder, you know, we have plenty of room. There's going to be a lot of mass in this sculpture. But I like to start off with the primary forms, the pelvis, the rib cage, and the head. So I'm just going to start adding pieces of clay to build up those. And if you guys have questions or anything, or comments or topics or things of interest you'd like me to talk about, I'd be happy to do that. And we'll just get hopefully a decent gesture, steady sculpture sketch done by the end of this. So quite a bit of mass up in the chest, so I can go ahead and add a decent amount of clay there in the rib cage. Make sure I'm focused. The first live stream I did yesterday, I was not focused the whole time, and I didn't do it. Somebody's saying no foil. Yeah, these smaller studies, I don't use aluminum foil, but if I was doing it in like a polymer clay that I was going to bake, which maybe I'll do in a little bit later. Let's see, this arm I want to lift up a little bit more. If I was doing a polymer clay, then I probably would use aluminum foil, but for this one, it's small, and it's a non-dry modeling clay, so I'm not too worried about it, about using that much clay. This is so small, I probably won't use that much clay anyway. It's only maybe not even a pound. Quite a bit under, actually. Let's see. So let's also start to give some thickness to the leg, because it also will be pretty thick. And I want to try to follow the gesture of the forms. Let's see. In a way that looks good. There's quite a lot of mass in the glutes, the buttocks. These bodybuilders, the largest, I think the largest muscle is the gluteus maximus, as far as by mass. And then the longest muscle is, I think, are the quad muscles, the leg. Maybe it's the sartorius. It kind of twists. I forget. Anyway, but there's going to be a lot of mass. This is, you know, a massive figure, so I want to build out that mass. And again, because I only have one angle, it's kind of ambiguous whether, you know, whether this leg here is right next to the knee or if it's out. I suspect it's closer, like they're more aligned, but just to make it a more balanced and interesting sculpture, I'm going to kind of tuck this leg behind and bring this foot out a little bit more. And that's kind of the judgments you have to make when you're taking a single photo reference and turning it into a sculpture study of the entire figure in 3D. You have to make some judgments on what you think, where you think the masses should go, and exactly how the joints are turned in space. And so, let's see, once we get a little bit more mass, then we'll start to refine and define the details. And I like these small gesture studies. They can be really fun exercises. Usually take about an hour. I don't know if I'll spend a full hour on this one, but you can usually get quite a bit of visual information in place in an hour. And with sculpting, so many parts of sculpting take a long time. So, and I'm kind of a sprinter. I like quick things, which is ironic because sculpting is like the marathon running of the arts. It just takes forever. But I really like, quick sketches. Let's see. I'm gonna widen out the back, the latissimus dorsi muscles, which are really present. We got the rib cage coming across. And with these small studies, I try to do the whole thing by hand without any tools, because tools are really for slowing things down, being more precise. But with this, I'm just trying to create something that's a simplification. Let's see, how's that looking? Okay, so I'm seeing that. Let's see, I'm bending the back a little bit much. Let's get the head, get some mass for the head and neck. Started. Maybe I will grab just one tool just for some of the areas like the neck. I just have a hard time making sure that that's not moving over into the arm, and I want to have space, so I'll just use maybe a butter knife to change up those forms a little bit, or to just push in that neck. Okay, so we got the head. Let's actually bring this up a little bit. With everything in the beginning, you want to think simple. So I'm just basically doing cylinders for the arms and legs that just follow the gesture that I'm seeing. Then we'll add the muscles, which is really that's really what this pose is about and this study is about, is finding the muscles. But we'll add those thoughtfully as we develop the forms after we have those primary forms of the cylinders and the gesture in place. There we go. And then sometimes as I add the clay, the pose will change a little bit. So every once in a while I'm setting it down and then checking to make sure that the gesture is still what I want it to be. I feel like this arm needs to come back here. How long should I take for one of those tiny studies? About an hour. I would give one of these an hour to 2 hours for these small, quick gesture studies. They're really just to try to understand the pose and to get something, interesting down in a short amount of time. They're not really supposed to be a super long, drawn out sculpture. Though you could, if you really like what's happening, you could take it to you could finish the sculpture. Okay. Let's just finish up this. And because this is Chavant medium mixed with just a little bit of hard, as it sets up, it does give some support to the armature so that it's not constantly changing. Like as I'm moving things around and adding clay, I'm sometimes bending the armature in different directions. But then once it has one layer of clay, then it becomes a little bit firmer, and I'm not messing things up as much as I continue to add things. Oh, this one comes up and then the toes come down, so I'm gonna do that. Down a little bit. And I set it down to make sure that it's still relatively balanced. It feels like it's not as balanced as it was. And he's more upright. Somebody's asking, "Hi Andrew, can you share wood base details?" wood base. So I assume you're talking about how to make a wood base for a sculpture. Um, let's see. Do I have some? So if you're talking about a wood base for um, like an armature or a sculpture like this, a sculpture like this, usually what I do is I just put either a nail or a screw into the base, and then I wrap the wire tightly around it, and then make a base for a sculpture study. That's what I would use for that if I don't want any external support for the armature. So it's just a screw, and then tightly I'll wrap the wire armature around that screw with some additional aluminum wire. So that's usually the type of base that I use for these sculpture studies. And that's good, and it works really well for if you want to make a mold and cast it, because it doesn't have that external support getting in the way. If you're talking about a base for like a finished sculpture and you want to make it out of wood, like a dark wood, like walnut, looks really nice as a base, then it's really just finishing the piece of wood to a nice finish. And then usually I'll drill a hole in the base and then countersink a bigger hole so that I can put a nut or a bolt into the sculpture. I'll put a pin in the sculpture, usually a 1/4 inch pin, so that I can screw the sculpture into the base from the bottom, and that way you have a really secure connection onto that wood base. But then it's just a lot of sanding and making sure that you're finishing that base so that it looks nice if it's going to be the finished base for a sculpture. And I've done that. I've done quite a few wood bases. They look nice, but I don't think they present as well as stone. Usually black granite is what people want to see for the base for their sculptures. Okay, now I'm going to start to add more of the muscles to this sculpture. Got some different color clay mixed in. Okay, so we got this big, thick front quad muscle over here. And I'm starting, I start from the angle that I can observe, so I want to make sure that I have that accurately represented. And then once I have that, then I can use that to judge the other angles off of. These studies are great because it gives you an idea of what you don't know. Like when I'm turning this to the side, like here, I can just observe the reference. Then when I turn it to the side, I need to invent whatever this silhouette looks like from this side. And, you know, if I haven't sculpted a lot or haven't observed the figure a lot, then that's going to be a really tricky thing to do. Even if you do have experience, it's always, or it can frequently be a very difficult thing to know exactly how to represent the muscles and the joints in a specific pose that you haven't sculpted before. So I'm just trying to think about how are those muscles wrapping around the figure. And I might also, I'm going to do this, I'm going to draw a center line for the rib cage. So the rib cage is kind of going this way, and the pelvis is going this way. Most of the twisting is happening here in the midsection, but the pelvis is facing one way, and the rib cage is facing another way. So the pelvis is like that, and then the rib cage is over here like that. And then the twist is happening here. And so I have to take that twist into account as I'm thinking about how these muscles are wrapping around the figure. And there would be these large muscles of the back. There's kind of two columns that run down the back, and they would be massive on this bodybuilder. That's where a lot of the mass of the back comes from. Then it transitions into that latissimus dorsi muscle. That's the wing muscle that gives you that A frame, that triangular shape, upside down triangle shape, bodybuilders. Then we got this glute that's wrapping. This one's stretched quite a bit. This glute is coming and stretching around. And the calf muscle is like squished. This upper leg is squishing this down on both sides. Go ahead and add a little bit more to the head. So he says, "Hola desde Colombia, gracias por compartir." De nada. De nada. Hello from Colombia. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, it's cool that so many people from so many different places can observe and learn from wherever you're at. Let's see, this is he's kind of looking down. So let's have him looking down. And then we have the just massive muscles of the tricep coming forward quite a bit. I'm just taking, I'm taking a little piece of clay, rolling it into a coil, and then trying to lay it along where I know the direction the muscle is traveling. Let's get that deltoid shoulder muscle in place. This would be very squished on this backside because that deltoid is kind of pressing. Right there. Let's see. Let me grab a piece of wood so that I can set it here like that, and that way I can move this without turning the whole table, just to kind of get a sense of what's happening. Let's add some more to this calf muscle that's coming down here. Let's see, this wants to tilt. I'm trying to decide like what it is that's making this unbalanced. I want it to be balanced. Okay, let's go ahead and continue with the fun part of the sculpture, which is the muscles. So this back leg is even thicker than what I have. Put those muscles on the back of the leg. We have the tendons are coming down. There we go. That's looking a little bit more what we're seeing, but it's very 2D. You see, I'm really just focusing on it from this angle, and then I can address it from the other angles. And I'll do that in a little bit. And over here we have these muscles of the inner thigh that take up a lot of mass. They're not flexed right now, so there's not that much definition in these. They're just kind of loose and filling up this space on the inner thigh. And let's wrap some more mass around this lat. That thickness there. We haven't even gotten to the chest and arm muscles yet. Let's see, why is it? I'm going to take this knife and tuck in that calf muscle right there. And I felt like the foot was just a little bit that this part from here to here was just a little long. In fact, it still feels a little bit long, so I'm just going to push things forward and try to move that, because I want that to feel right, or to be right. There we go. And now let's put the pecs, because those are a really big muscle group, big important part of what's happening with this pose. And they're wrapping around, so with that pectoralis muscle, it wraps around and then attaches up and mixes right in with the shoulder muscle. And so I want to make sure that that's happening, that the chest is going and then blending with the shoulder muscle up around the back. There we go. Very stretched. And then this one, same thing. And I have the mistake I generally make, and I just made it here, is that I make the chest muscle too high up, the attachment of the chest muscle too high, but it actually comes down the rib cage quite a bit, so I'm going to try to fix that. Same thing on the other side, and then we'll just, like I said, we'll wrap this around. So there's the shoulder on the other side. I'm going to wrap it around and then bring it down for the chest muscle. Go. And some more mass for this lat over here, which we can see coming out behind the chest. And I'm going to fill in some of this space that I know would be full, more full than what I have right now. Try to round things off and get a sense of what's happening all the way around. Let's see, I'm going to bring this head up just a little bit. Looks like he's looking down too much. Let's add some thickness to the neck. Now the fun part is kind of inventing these muscles as you're going around. So we have that shoulder. It's wrapping up into the pec. We've already started that. And then on this side we've got the bicep. Bicep over here. Give an indication of that. And I feel like this shoulder comes out even more than what I have. Over here. Somebody's asking, do you use water while sculpting? This is an oil and wax-based clay, so it's not a water-based clay. If I was using a water-based clay, a natural clay, then usually I would just have the clay be nice and moist at the beginning, like a lot of, be very hydrated, or a lot of water mixed in. And then I wouldn't use a lot of water while I'm actually doing the sculpting. Maybe once in a while, but usually you want to kind of let it dry, especially with these quicker, smaller studies. Though it does, water-based clay does dry pretty fast when the studies are this small. So it needs a little bit of mass if it's gonna retain its moisture. But if I was doing water-based clay, I wouldn't have the wire armature that I started with. I would figure out another way to do the armature. It's just a different ball game. The water-based. Got this muscle that's poking through. Tricep. So here you can see it's starting. It's starting to come together. Still has quite a bit to go, but this is kind of a fun part when you can see that you're starting to get closer to what you're observing. And let's come and add some thickness over here to this part of the inside of the thigh on this side, so that this leg isn't so two-dimensional. At which situation do you use water-based clay? Well, so water-based clay is a lot cheaper. It's natural. You can just dig it up from the ground, and then and sometimes you can just sculpt from the clay that's from the ground if you can find a clay deposit that are all over. So it's cheaper. Even if you do purchase it, it's less expensive. And if you have access to a kiln where you can fire the sculpture, then it's really great to use water-based clay, because then you can fire it and have a finished sculpture that's as hard as stone. And so if you have access to a kiln, or you can rent kiln time, then I think that it is worthwhile to sculpt with water-based clay. I just don't have a kiln yet. I'll probably try to get one at some point in the not too distant future, but I don't have one yet. And so until I get one, I'd like to, I just prefer working with oil-based clay, because I like the way it feels, and it doesn't get my studio all dusty with the clay. When it dries out, the dust gets everywhere, and it's not good to breathe in. So you want to keep it wet. And okay, this shoulder is also like that. Let's see, this arm's kind of twisting. Let's try to get the the arm more developed. So there's the forearm. And the wrist is turned this way, turned in towards the head. The wrist is in the palm of the hand. Then the tricep, people don't realize how much of the arm is tricep, especially the upper arm. Everybody focuses on the bicep, the biceps, but the tricep makes up quite a bit of mass in that arm, especially in this pose. You can see even on this one where the bicep is a lot of it, you know, that tricep is making up quite a bit, just about half of what you can see. When I tried to use clay on a wire skeleton like you're doing now, my clay cracked from everywhere. Was I doing something wrong, or was it because of the quality of the clay? So that's probably because you're using water-based clay. So the clays that I use are they're oil-based, and so if you're gonna use water-based clay, then usually you'll do the armature a little bit differently. Usually you'll use you can use let's see. So like a nail like this. This is a nail that I made a tool out of, but it's just a nail. And you can drive that down into a piece of wood and remove the top of the nail. And then once the sculpture starts to harden and becomes firm, you can just pull the nail out of the sculpture. So that's what my friend Leroy Transfield, who's a great sculptor, he uses that method of armatures. So he doesn't do this this aluminum wire figure for exactly that reason, because he wants to fire the sculptures, and because water-based clay, as it dries, it'll crack if there's armature inside of it. So yeah, what you want to do is just use metal rods as the armature, because they can be removed once the sculpture starts to just firm up a little bit, but it's not totally dry. You can just use some pliers and then just pull out the metal rods. And so that's what I would recommend doing if you're using water-based clay. And then if you have a wire armature, which I do recommend being able to build and understanding what you want to do with the armature, is you just use it as a reference for the proportions and everything, and you just have it separate from your sculpture, and then you can pose the armature exactly how you want the sculpture to be, and then you can just use this as a way to check your proportions and everything, but you don't actually have the armature inside the sculpture. And that way you can still use the armature as a tool, but you don't have to worry about it ruining the sculpture, which it will do if you're using water-based clay. Water-based clay is just an armature, doesn't usually work. You can also use, I've seen people use paper armatures for water-based clay, something that'll burn out, you know, paper and masking tape, or things that you can burn out during the firing process. So yeah, that's an issue with the type of clay that you're using. And that's why with most students I recommend a non-dry modeling clay, because it can be reused over and over again and it doesn't dry out. So you're not trying to finish the sculpture before it dries or anything like that. But I know not everybody, oil-based clays are a little bit more expensive, and they're not as easily accessible in some places. So if you can only get water water-based clay, then you just have to change the way you approach the sculpture. Saying thank you, your advice is so helpful. Glad to hear it. Yeah, I hope that the things that I go over can help somebody in some way at some point, because I think it's a great thing to learn to sculpt. It's a great thing to be creative and work with your hands to make beautiful things. Even if you're not sculpting, that's making beautiful things is a worthwhile pursuit, no matter what you're doing, no matter what your craft is. Even if you're just a builder or a construction worker or a homemaker, whatever you're doing, if you can make it beautiful and take pride in your work, then you just make everything better. Gonna build out the head a little bit more. Let's see, this neck is still pretty thin. So some areas are tight, like it's hard to get into that area right there. So I'm just taking a little piece of clay on the knife, and then I'm going to kind of reach in, let's see, and place that piece of clay and then kind of just press it in. Even with that knife, it's kind of hard angle to get in. Let me grab another tool. What I probably should have done first was build out the details of the head and neck before I did the arms, so that I'm not running into this problem where I'm trying to add clay to an inside area that's close to a bunch of other areas. But that's okay. We're just gonna make it work. That's what we have tools for. We can't get in. Somebody says, sorry if this is a dumb question, but if you decide you want to keep a sculpture made from oil-based clay, can it be fired in a kiln? I'm brand new to this. Be gentle with me. So yeah, that it won't work. It just melts. So like, I warm this clay up by putting it in the oven, and you can just melt this clay entirely, and it'll just melt like wax. And so what you want to do is make a mold and cast it. So you can use like a silicone mold, some sort of silicone, and I have videos on making cheap silicone molds on the Proco 3D channel. There's a couple videos that go over that process if you're interested. And the nice thing about making a mold is you can cast several versions of that sculpture, and that way you can have copies of the same sculpture. But mold making is tricky. It's difficult. I almost always make a mistake when I make a mold, and so there's a big learning curve that comes with that. But there are a lot of benefits if you're planning on doing multiple sculptures or multiple casts of the same sculpture. So this clay is primarily for mold making and casting. But yeah, no, it's a good question, and a lot of people, have that same question. But there's other types of clay you can get. So for example, if you want to invest in a clay that can be permanent, then you can use polymer clay, which can be baked in a normal oven, and it sculpts very similar to oil and wax-based clays. It also doesn't dry out, though it becomes a little bit crumbly. If you haven't worked it for a while, you have to kind of knead it to get it to soften up. And then you can bake it in a normal oven. You don't have to have a kiln, and it hardens to like a firm, almost plastic-like material. So that's polymer clay. You can use epoxy clay, which is a two-part clay that you mix together, and then it becomes hard after a while. And that's another option if you want a clay that you can sculpt with, and then it can become the permanent material. I haven't used epoxy clay, but it's one that I want to use. I have a sculpture series on YouTube that's like the Will It Sculpt series, where I test different materials. And one of the next ones I'd like to do is epoxy clay. And so that one, you just have to be conscientious of the time. You know, it sets up and becomes very hard after half an hour or so, or it starts setting up after half an hour, and then it takes a little while to cure. But then you have a finished sculpture, and you can make it permanent, or it becomes permanent. See, this calf muscle I want to make a little bit more exaggerated the way it's coming out. Somebody says, is it not as stressful when you only have half an hour to sculpt? Let's see. I guess we're coming up. Oh yeah, we're coming up on an hour. So I find this to be not stressful at all. In fact, the time has kind of flown by. I didn't even know we were almost coming up on an hour. So I've been doing this for about an hour, and it's fun. I really like these sketches. Maybe I'll continue this sketch tomorrow, because it's fun at this stage, and I could count this as a sculpture sketch, but it's fun to get it just a little bit more developed, where you can start to see a little bit more of the details of the hands and face and things. So maybe I'll continue this one tomorrow. But yeah, it is enjoyable. I don't find sculpting stressful. Well, I guess that's not always true. Some parts of sculpting I find stressful, but these sketches I don't. These are really enjoyable and fun. Maybe that's why I should get the epoxy clay, because then I can do these sketches and then have it done in an hour or so, and then just have a finished sculpture. Okay, I think I'm going to end it there for today. So here's a look at the final sculpture study. And be sure to check out my sculpting courses if you're interested in taking sculpture a little bit more seriously and you want to take an online class that shows you everything that I wish I knew when I started. There's also the PDFs, free PDFs on the Figure Sculpting Fundamentals course, It's like a assignment list. So you go through, you watch the free lessons. It has links to all of the free lessons, and you can just do those. And it's a free PDF. It also has links to the premium lessons, but if you haven't purchased the full premium course, then you can just start with the free stuff. And I hope you do take advantage of that, because it will help you improve your sculptures pretty quickly if you do the assignments and practice regularly, which is the hardest part, is just practicing. But this was fun. What do you guys think? Isn't that cool and a good start to a gesture study? But yeah, I'll try to continue this same one tomorrow. It looks like there's some things that could be fixed and addressed, and it could definitely get a lot better. So we'll see if I can take it a little bit farther tomorrow. There's a couple more questions before we go. I only really found you on YouTube this afternoon, so I'll check out the videos on material before I get started. I'm a new Proco member to start the drawing basics. Oh, that's great. Proco is great, and my sculpting courses over at proco.com are also a great resource if you really want to be serious about sculpture. Somebody says, I bought the cheap clay from Hobby Lobby that you mentioned in a video. I use it to make patterns for masks now. Thank you for showing us that. Way cheaper than monster clay. Yeah, it's definitely cheaper, and it works great. You know, it's soft, but still works great. Yeah, thank you guys, and hopefully I'll see you again in another live stream or another video soon. As always, I hope you can stay creative and stay productive, and see you around.